Just we'd go to protest for everything, and so she was very amenable to me not eating animal products. And then became vegan. So yeah, and that's been my whole life. Great, that's me. Okay.
Oh, thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle. I work for the Catskill Animal Sanctuary. I, too, have been vegan for probably a lot longer than you. Sorry. And am older than you, but that's okay. So I will say my daughter was the catalyst for me. She came home. She was about 9 years old, and she said, "No more meat." And they had watched a documentary at school. And so it was just like that, instantaneous. I stopped eating anything that had to do with an animal. Always been an animal lover, but I have to say, working for the sanctuary really changed my life. I could probably have people stand that are part of the sanctuary here, people that work, people that have worked, people that sponsor animals. It's a space where you can come, be yourself, be true to yourself. You can also learn about who you are when you can snuggle a sheep, when you can literally cuddle with a pig. Your life can change. It truly can, if you have the openness and the willingness to meet someone where they are, but also just show up, and you can become just who you want to be. I think for me, it's being authentic to myself in that space is incredible. And then you're surrounded by others who just either want what you are feeling or they get it like that finger snap. So that's me. Mindy?
Sure. For me, from the time I was probably a year old, my dad came home with a dog. He had, I don't know if he was doing consulting, I can't remember, but they were using the dogs for testing. And he called everyone he knew, and he was able to bring 3 dogs. He bought them because the fact of thinking that they were going to do this to these animals. So from that time, I just was blown away that the mindfulness of that. So from my entire, I guess, childhood, I've just always loved animals. I've also, when I was in New Jersey, I've lived here 9 years. I was part of the Environmental Shade Tree Commission of our town. And so for me, the respect of every living thing, from the insects to the animals to the trees to the plants, is a huge part of who I am. So working for Treeline, to be in line with my employer, we produce products that give people opportunities to have something else, to have options. So I'm really proud of that. Yeah.
Would you like to go?
Hi, I am Agafin. I'm currently an animal caregiver at Woodstock Animal Sanctuary and at Institute for Animal Happiness. I grew up in a very rural area and a rural town. I have been around animals my entire life. My family was part of the FFA. I went to 4-H. I thought I'd be a dairy farmer for a hot minute, and here I am now. I tried a couple different dairy farms because I was like, oh, surely there must be a better one. Plot twist, there isn't. And then I was a vegetable farmer for a while, and then I built wheelchairs for animals for many years. And while I was there, a friend of mine who was a vegan said, hey, there's a sanctuary conference that you should go to because it would be a great place to talk about animals and helping them and all that. And I left that conference vegan, and then worked on a couple different sanctuaries. And so I have seen the whole spectrum of animals in farms and in homes and being cared for, and being rescued, and being in the sanctuary world is the opportunity to see both the best and the worst of humanity, and usually that's on the same day. And yeah, my veganism is very based in consent and based in the idea that everybody has their own world, and that world is unknowable to many other people. Yeah. Oh, you already have a microphone.
Oh, all right. I didn't realize we had to. Great.
Hi, I'm David. So I've been an animal activist for a long time, and I think I first realized the relation we kind of saw in the movie too between like sexism and racism and speciesism. It came very quickly to me how we can apply principles just to one group and not to another didn't make any sense to me. Now in particular we have a small rescue farm, and the more time I spend with animals, I realize the emotional bonds, the intricate relationships they have with each other. I mean, they have families, friendship, they develop friendships, families, they have brothers, sisters, mothers, and fathers, and you know, as we saw in the movie too, to think that we're just disavowing those kind of relationships is really difficult. And so that's informed my good deal of my life.
Hi. So I think I'm the only one on this stage who's worked everywhere except Ligustas, but I've worked at Treeline, at Catskill, at Woodstock. Can you rephrase the question, the first question again? 'Cause I just want to make sure I answer it.
Yeah, I was hoping that you could share your journey to where you are now.
Okay.
And if you want to talk specifically about speciesism, then please do so.
All right. I think just I've been one of those children that always questioned things. I think all children question things, or hopefully are empowered to. But at some point, maybe you stop questioning things and you kind of just start going with the flow. And my interest in veganism actually stems a hell of a lot out of my staunch human rights, because I am furious and driven almost mad by the cognitive disconnect and cognitive dissonance of humanity. I can't take it anymore. I cannot stand the way we, in general, just cherry pick what's good and bad. There's no consistency. If you think there's moral consistency in this society, there just isn't. And so since I was a kid, I was like, why are we stepping over homeless people on the street in New York City to get on the subway? And why are those cows that my camp went to visit I'm sorry, this was a school trip, they shoved their fist into the rear of a cow to impregnate them and did it in front of us kids, and we're like, hey, isn't that great? And I was so horrified. They had a glove, and we're supposed to be like, and I'm looking at all the adults around me, and they're all like, hey, it's great. And they all looked psycho to me. And I'm still that person going, hey, genocide's bad. Killing billions of animals is bad. And people look at me like I'm nuts, and maybe I am. But then I started Institute for Animal Happiness, basically bringing my first chicken home from an animal rescue, where I noticed speciesism. And so all the other animals were being treated really great, and the chickens were like this afterthought in a field in the back, just dying and not getting the same love and concern. And I'm here to support this conversation because I'm just, I feel like life is driving me mad. Like I don't even feel like I belong here. I'm 57 now, and I still don't get human society, and I still don't get one thing about it, except that we all need to eat and sleep and stuff, like the basics, I understand.
Thank you. I want to pose a question, and please, anybody who feels called to answer, you can take the mic. In the beginning of the film, we hear, I wrote his name down, Rick Dove, who is a member of the Riverkeeper organization in North Carolina. And he talks about how he is a Republican, but that animal rights are not political. And I'm curious, in this day and age when we are living in an increasing polarized society, I'm curious to hear your take on that.
About whether animal rights is political or not?
Yeah, and what does that mean to you? How does that resonate with you?
Well, for me, I mean, two levels. Animal rights, other forms of oppression like sexism, classism, racism are personal and political. And if you're looking at them on the personal level, then you'd be looking at all of them on the personal level. And if you're looking at them on a political level, you'd be considering them all on the political level as well. But it seemed to me like just a way to disqualify the argument, or discredit the argument and say that it's not worthy of consideration at a political level, whereas other issues would be. Or if the other issues aren't either, then nothing is worthy of consideration at a political level. But I mean, in essence, to discredit the argument, that's the way it seemed to me anyway.
I totally disagree, but I feel like he actually said it in a way that I thought was really wonderful, in the sense of it shouldn't be political, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think we're kind of saying the same thing, basically.
Yeah.
But like, you know, there's certain things that we just should hold in our society of, I shouldn't be stealing children. You know, we like shouldn't be eating animals. Like, these things should be obvious in a rational society. They shouldn't be political. They become political because we live in a deeply fucked up world. Yeah. But, you know, so I really appreciated that. And I think that having been in the animal rights world for, you know, decades, seeing the divisions between like purity politics and having to be so perfect or else you're not a good vegan or, you know, whatever, I think is really holding us back. And I think just going back to a place of simple morality could really, you know, and be like, these things aren't actually political, you know, like we should have universal health care, we should have, you know, like pigs not being tortured. These are kind of obvious. So I don't know, I really like that part, but I see your point.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, they're like made political at a legislative level.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really a personal question.
Anybody else?
I think that maybe what the speaker in the film was trying to get at was that animal rights isn't necessarily a partisan issue, as opposed to it not being political, because anything that has a law about it and consequences around that law is political, just like inherently. Right. And so whether or not it should or shouldn't be is also irrelevant, because it is, just like point blank. But I think the point that the person who said that in the film was that like both sides of the aisle, so to speak, and that there are folks who, you know, are proponents for animal rights and animal liberation, but also have vastly different views on everything else, which is very weird. But it's which is also a thing that is just like there. But yeah, as like just by the nature of there are consequences like legally for following or not following, that inherently makes it political, just like full stop. And it doesn't matter or shouldn't matter like what side of the aisle you're on, but I think that might have been more what the speaker in the film was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whether or not you can actually, you know, fully embody the animal liberation movement on one side or the other is a whole different story, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Anybody else have thoughts on that? I don't want to exclude anybody.
Well,
No.
I mean, this isn't, I don't know if, this isn't so much political, but if we're talking about like human politics, body politics, and Augusta mentioned the purity stuff, that, I mean, I just want to say this film was made a bunch of years ago, and it's pretty interesting how the conversations, a lot of people are new to them, but like the conversations, if you're working in the movement in any way, have really well surpassed this. In fact, there's at least 3 people in that film that, and this is interesting, and I want you to understand this is the cognitive disconnect I'm talking about. There are 3 people in that film that were actually removed from their organizations for harassing people, harming people, sexually harassing people. And so the vegan movement has, just veganism alone doesn't make you pure or more moral, or, and so that's why I identify more as a collective liberationist, and I don't even really use the word vegan anymore, because vegan has, in the mainstream, become a tool of the wealthy, of the elite. It's just as much anti-labor, what I've experienced at a lot of places. That so, you know, for me, it's the cognitive disconnect, and that is something reinforced by our political system, the inherent society and systems that we live in.
That's really well said. So I'm curious to hear what is the conversation now, and how has it gone since the making of this film? How is it different now?
A conversation about veganism or speciesism?
Well, Rebecca, you mentioned that, yeah. Yeah.
Because I know everybody here would have something to say, but it's more
Yeah.
like in the early days of animal rights, and I've been since I was 10, so it was really and needed to be 100% focused on non-humans. But I think then we found out our movement was just becoming hypocritical in other ways. So what I see now is an expanded conversation that is more trying to be consistent, because we had to weed out all the people, interestingly enough, exploiting animals for their organizations, for their agenda. We know that there are horrible racists running animal rights organizations, you know, just like there are great people running animal rights organizations. We know that there's a lot of vegan washing of like the Israeli military, the IOF, but we don't want people getting killed of any, you know, so the vegan movement's had a lot of like sort of internal conversations, and collective liberation is what I'm hearing people talk about more and more and more.
So become more intersectional.
Yes.
Anybody else want to speak on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say also that intersectional is probably important to where veganism is now, in relation to social justice, food justice, social justice, but how it is seen as a form of oppression related to that's relational and related to the other forms of oppression. And that was certainly, I think, what you were saying in the early days of veganism. That conversation didn't happen. That's not at all. And so that was a fault of that was an early stage in the development of veganism, fault or not. But it's come to a very different place now. So, like Rebecca, I tend to not talk about veganism and so forth, and more likely to talk about speciesism or intersection of speciesism and other forms of oppression and so forth, because it's broader than veganism, and veganism becomes so stigmatized also.
I know Michelle wants to say something. I'm just wondering if somebody on the stage wants to quickly define intersectionality for those who aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, just relation between, want to do it?
Well, there's also, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be like Miss Woke or whatever, but the term was coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, and it primarily is a conversation within conversations about racism, women of color, misogyny, and in that space, but it has been used to show the point where all these causes overlap, all these movements, and so that intersection where there's commonality. And that is very much what he's talking about with speciesism. Like, he was trying to keep saying, but there's this intersection, there's this intersection.
I was only going to say, from our standpoint at the sanctuary, you get people from all over the world that come to visit tri-state area, but some people come from literally all over the world. And the most important thing that we can do, I think, as a human person meeting someone for the first time, is meeting them where they are. And the animals really speak for themselves. So if you've never, and we get many people that have never seen a cow up close. We get people from the city, we get people from I'm serious, they've never seen a cow and it's 3,000 pounds. So when that cow can interact with you and lick you and respond to you and sense your mood, I feel like the dialogue that our tours manager and our tours team, humane educators, have is it's a life-changing experience. But we're not preaching to you. We're not saying you have to do this. It just kind of comes, and I think that natural approach is really key. And I always just say I'm plant-based, and people, I think they respond to that because it's just like, I eat plants. Like,
oh, can I say one tiny thing? Yeah, I think to the point about intersectionality, I feel like there's a huge. I'm curious, like, how many people in the audience are vegan if we're just all talking to each other, and maybe these points are you're all bored as hell. But I feel like if you are vegan, after a certain period of, maybe, for certain people it's much more difficult to be or not, but, after a certain point, it just kind of is. And then at that point, it's really not different from anything else. You're just eating meals like everyone else is eating meals. And I think at that point, you really just can't be like, oh, I'm vegan, I've solved every problem, now I can, rest, because there's a million other things happening. So I feel like whenever, years ago when I used to get in fights with non-vegans, which I never do, thank God, and people would be like, but don't you care about human rights? It's very possible to work for human rights while not eating a hamburger. Like, it doesn't actually take up extra time. So I feel like it's like, it's easy. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Okay, let's see. I do want to make sure we leave time for audience questions. I'm curious to hear, though, if y'all can share some examples of the relationships that you've had with other species. Just, can you share some personal stories? I'm sure you have some. You just did, yeah, you did.
I'll just say one name, and it's Russell, and he was a potbelly pig, and this little man changed my life. But I will say that building trust, consistent, patient attention, both ways. He watched me, I watched him. But every day it was that same consistent love and trust. And I will never be the same because of him and that relationship. And trust me, there's many more that are at the sanctuary, but he's around my neck, my little piggies. But he changed my life. And I feel like if anybody ever had that chance or that opportunity to allow themselves that joy, that, I don't know, there's something unconditional about a human and an animal experience. I've found you can do something with an animal that sometimes you can't do with another human. You can talk to them, you can share your feelings, you can just, I don't know, it's an outcry of something, but it was just a beautiful relationship, and I wish everyone could experience what that was, and I hope that you all have.
That's beautiful, thank you. Anybody else?
So working at sanctuaries and having worked for Eddie's Wheels, I've been in the presence of hundreds upon hundreds of animals. But I think the first two that I need to tell you all about that if anyone who knows me knows who I'm going to talk about next. I am the companion to two disabled animals. One is a dog, allegedly, and the other is a one-legged chicken who lives in my studio apartment. And my landlord is here. Hi. And it's a very interesting perspective to walk around downtown Kingston with a dog in a wheelchair and a chicken in your jacket. And it's a really great way to see who's paying attention, because of how often I'll have a whole conversation with somebody about my dog, and then they're like, "Wait a minute, is that a chicken in your jacket?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" But in terms of the connection and also the speciesism that I just by existing with my family experience, because the reaction to my dog in a wheelchair is very different than my one-legged chicken. And really, they're both just, my family, and they're both just as weird as everybody else. And the chicken bullies the dog. So there is no hierarchy in which the human is at the top. And yeah, collectively we don't have very many legs, and I'm the one with the most, and I have no authority in this situation. But the difference in how folks perceive my companions and my experience with my companions is almost like a night and day of what folks expect from different animals. Because folks expect a dog to be just getting over their disability, or he doesn't even know anything's different. It's no, he definitely does. He just doesn't care. And same with my chicken. She's never known what it's like to have two legs, so she doesn't see her life any differently. And I don't see her any differently from any other chicken, except for the fact that she's in my living room all the time. I'm not sure if that's really getting to the nuance and the nitty-gritty of what I want to say. I've written about my companions, and if you hit up Google, I'm sure you'll find it. Yeah, and those are just the two that I have spent the most time with, and that's not even thinking about Mrs. Potts, who's a chicken that never lived in my living room, unfortunately. But I think about her every single day. And she passed away almost 2 years ago. And she was just a chicken. But I think about her every single day. And to have a connection with a non-human that impacts my actual day-to-day life and my memories is something that I hope everybody gets to experience. And I don't know if folks can actually comprehend the depth of what animal liberation means without having that kind of connection with somebody.
Yeah, that strikes me when you say hierarchy. Mm-hmm. That really strikes me also, to live your life with a non-human animal and actually feel the animal as an equal, and knowing that people in general don't look at your relationship with the animal that way, that there's going to be some hierarchy. And when you said just a chicken, same thing, that to know that the relationship with the chicken isn't a relationship with just a chicken, even though it's perceived that way by most people.
One of the things I think the filmmaker does really well is provide a lot of human examples. I mean, for an audience that might need convincing the way he purported to provide a lot of human examples of similar situations, suffering, using the Holocaust survivor, but interviewing Holocaust survivors, and just, providing a lot of context for his exploration of speciesism. I have so much trouble with that word. And so I guess I do want to move to some audience questions. And before we do that, I do want to ask the panelists one final question. There was a moment toward the end of the film where the camera operator is driving, and he is talking about, he asks the question, he's just come to kind of have his aha moment, his cumulative aha moment, as he says, and he asks the question, how do you go on in that world? How do you not see that world and everyone in it as dark and dangerous? And so I'm curious for you all, I know that the filmmaker said the film was not about providing answers, but I'm curious how you would respond to that question and how you find the light in what could be a dark and dangerous world.
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying something. So, Lagusta, you reminded me also, I don't usually watch films like this, but we all know that once you've seen them, you can't ever unsee them. And so you live in that world all the time. And you have to find a way to live with that knowledge. So my hope is that anyone who has the knowledge will continue to cultivate the knowledge and know that everything you do with the knowledge is going to make a difference. It always makes a difference on a small scale. One small scale added to another small scale makes a larger scale, and that's all a revolution ever is. So everything we do makes a difference, what we're doing here tonight, and just try not to give up hope.
I don't know, I needed to hear that. Because I'm such a misanthrope at this point, and I can't believe my organization is called the Institute for Animal Happiness, because I think, how do you go on? I like defiance, disobedience, wanting to be a monkey wrench in the wheel. I get joy from fighting back against a system I despise it. Sorry. So I value the people I've met through activism. They all inspire me, keep me going. I think that when he said that in the film, I related, when he was sitting in the car and he was like, how do you go on? And part of me, I'll be honest, I've had friends sit through movies like this with me and not change. And I've done tours when I worked at the other sanctuaries. I've been standing over a pig that we rescued from some hellish situation that we all banded with. It took 5 of us to bandage their wound every day for 2 months to get it to heal. I'll tell that story, and literally, someone will always go, bacon, like it's a funny joke right in front of me. And I not only don't think humans are superior, I think we are the opposite. We are the only species that tries to annihilate itself. I think what keeps me going purely is the idea that whatever little tiny increment of change I can contribute to in my short life here, that I become driven to do it with others. And it's always communal, like Happy Cart Vegan is a free vegan food program. Gabby, the chef, is there, and volunteers are here, and we all just meet every week and we try to get this food to the public. and films like this with Hudson Valley Veg Fest, and you just become so driven to do events and educational things and the micro sanctuary we have. So just the way I justify going on is like, well, if I can make and this isn't a saint complex thing, it's just for a lot of us, being on this planet is purely a communal experience and supposed to be. And it's such a disconnected place, you know? I mean, again, to criticize the film, because I think dissent is the heart of any kind of, ethical society. Like, there's one point where Bruce Friedrich, who, and I respect everyone's contributions in the film, but he says, like, it's no big deal to just go get a veggie burger. It's so easy. It's so easy to be vegan. Like, there's almost only white people in this film who are fairly well off, and actually for the global majority, food is very hard to come by, and they don't even have food choices. Like, I literally know animal rights activists that will not post about a refugee situation because they're not vegan. Like, we've lost our compass. I don't know if we ever had one because I haven't been alive for all time, but so for me, I'm just here for this experience with you all, and I'm constantly questioning, like, where's the heart? Where's the heart in us? Where is our joy really centered? Is it in being alone in a room at a computer, pushing a button? Or is it out in the streets with people trying to help each other, everyone thrive, not just survive? Feel joy as resistance, feel community as an empowerment, not some leader, some president is not our empowerment. We are the power. I don't know. So, let that drive you in your choices, and I can't see how veganism is not going to be one of your choices if you start saying, I don't want to contribute to harm. I don't want endless, mindless, hidden harm constantly to be the basis of everything, especially preventable harm. And I don't want harm marketed to me as some pretty happy thing with a little red barn and smiling people, when that's not what I'm seeing with my own eyes. And then, of course, what they did is they hid it. So you couldn't see it with your own eyes. So, there's so many layers to this, but I hope everyone will, make it your individual journey. I don't want to join a cult. Like, veganism is not a cult, and if I ever feel like it's a cult, I move away. Be an individual person, but choose to do the least harm and choose to empower people as a drive in your life. What else are we here for? I mean, we're all suffering, so much suffering. It's got to stop.
Thank you, Rebecca. Who else wants to respond? Anybody over here?
I eat a lot of candy. That's how I get through the days.
She does have really good chocolate. For me, from the time I was young, my grandparents were involved in multiple organizations. So for me, having an example of constantly having hope, never giving up, and just constantly trying to do better and to be an example for others to see. Like, for me, when I discovered, like, I made it a point, if I had friends over for dinner, decades ago, I would make food and they'd be like, this isn't vegetarian, this isn't vegan. Yeah, it is. So by showing them it's delicious, you can make something really incredible with not a lot of ingredients, just flavor. So even like I've made cheesecakes, like I made a cheesecake with our cream cheese, and our owner, who is like, I don't like cheesecake, I never liked cheesecake. I'm like, just try it. And he's like, wow, it's really good. So we did a expo in California, and he had me make cheesecakes for the expo because everyone does cheese and crackers, but you can make a cheesecake, and it doesn't have to be dairy. So it's just those little things that can inspire people to go, and like that's what this movie was really about, right? It's just thinking about it, and it actually, having that the cameraman, I mean, he didn't even know what to do with the fact that he was like, wow. So if we can all have those moments, and then that can make change in some way, that's just one person, the next person, the next person, the more people. And I think in a positive way, if you try to show that as an example, that this is a good thing and we need to care about each other, that can make the change.
I'll just add one thing. You never know when you're having a conversation with someone what they'll take away. And I feel like for me, living my life, I'm going to be 65. Everybody doesn't think I'm going to be 65. So eating plants is a really good thing, but I would never force that on anyone. But I think if you lead by example, you speak your truth and be your authentic self, I really feel like the ripple effect that happens is natural and organic. I would never, when I managed our homestead property, we would have groups come in, you know, and a lot of them said, we are a vegan group, we're from the city. And they would speak and they would talk, and I thought, oh my God, I don't want to be that. I did not want to be that. And when they said, Michelle, what do you think about that? I said, you scare me. Like, you're scaring me. And I feel like if you took a more gentler approach, you would receive more people instead of putting up this wall that just says, I am this, and if you're not. So I feel like just be kind. Just be kind.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach, and what gets me through is spite at this point. Just if you can't beat them, don't let them win. Like, as someone who is a targeted identity and also cares for animals in the United States in 2026, I don't have a lot of hope. But I do have curiosity of what's going to play out and who has better ideas. And so to kind of bring it back to the like intersectional part, like I took a tally of how many white guys they interviewed in this movie, which was 44, compared to 3 people of color and about 14 women, white women, one of which was naked. Yeah. The first one. So like just pointing out that like while the ideas in this film are very important and very valid, like as a white person, I don't make the slavery comparison because that's not my, like you can't compare oppressions. Like full stop. There's no hierarchy of oppressions. The idea that some suffering is worse than another is not how my veganism works. And looking for the flip side of that, of like scholars like Afko and Christopher Sebastian, who beautifully tie in racism to animal rights and white supremacy into capitalism, and looking at folks who are not white guys, because Peter Singer did not found the animal rights movement in 1975. Oh yeah, I was like, there's so many levels wrong with that. And scholars like Sonora Taylor, who beautifully ties disability liberation into animal liberation. And there are so many ideas and wonderful ideas and examples of what better looks like. And that's what keeps me going, is looking for the folks who have the better ideas.
Thank you. Okay, so any questions from the audience? Any comments?
Hi, my name is James. I'm an environmental artist and storyteller. I've traveled extensively to India and Nepal doing creative environmental projects with a lot of groups that express their values, opinions, and ideas about this stuff in all sorts of wonderful ways. When I hear the dialogue about just the concept and the topic of veganism as explored in both this film and on the stage right now, we're talking about politics and divisions across ideas about how stuff is going. How much attention or energy in the, let's say, evangelism of veganism is focused on the cultural aspect of all this? So around the world, food is looked at in a lot of different ways. Meat, the way it's prepared, the animals, the time of the year it's taken in. And it's kind of hard to peel back at that and say, well, don't take meat, take this instead, or let's be mindful about what's going on. Because these things are so tied into identity, cultural norms, et cetera. How, and this is to everybody on the stage, or maybe anybody else, how do you approach that, or is that part of the, I guess, exploration or dialogue of what's going on?
First of all, I want to say that veganism has deep roots in cultures all over the world. In India, you know, the Jains are pretty much the longest standing, I think, ancient vegan religious body. But that was one issue I have with a lot of these films, is if you watched only these films, you'd think white guys invented veganism, and they did not. These are huge, but also I want to say that, yes, there's cultural traditions, and that's part of my problem, is so much of the vegan movement has so little respect for different cultures and the different places that they're at. I mean, it shouldn't be, and a lot don't. I don't hang out with those vegans, aside from all cultures' traditions, and I'm putting that in quotes. We've got them. We have our religious traditions about that involve eating animals, but there's a greater reckoning coming, and that is the effect of animal agriculture on the environment and the increase in pandemics we are going to be seeing. So obviously zoonotic pandemics pretty much are rooted, or I should say incubated, in animal farming. Animal farming, big or small, is the perfect incubator for zoonotic pandemics. And we have that coming down the pipe, where your tradition, your religious slaughter, whatever you do, all of this has, I don't know, what do you call it, an expiration date? There's going to come a time when it's so unfeasible to raise animals. And I will say one of my so I wish people to have that information, that education, that science knowledge, that fact, to understand that, yes, we should all care about our traditions, but I think we're going to have to find new ones that are more humane, are better for us, as a species. It's great to have a tradition, but like a tradition like Thanksgiving is 45 million birds killed for one single day. And what I'm seeing in the news is that HPAI, also known as avian influenza, we're quiet here, we're not talking about it, but there was a farm last year right in Ulster County that lost 50 birds. There were dead turkey vultures right in Red Hook, 5 minutes from our avian sanctuary, all found dead. One on my friend's lawn. They collected the samples, all dead from avian influenza. And right now in the Midwest, turkey farms being decimated. So the loss is something like $384 billion to the industry. You don't even hear about it. That's what I want people to wake up. You don't hear when 1 million birds are gassed at a farm because there was an HPAI outbreak. You don't barely hear that humans are starting to die in the United States from HPAI. I've never seen an industry with so much power. And if our traditions and our taste buds for a small amount of food are gonna make us put all rationale and all human life and all animal life to the side for this industry, you have to question, why do they have this power? This is literally power over all life on Earth as far as I'm concerned. Because if HPAI comes and starts the version that mutates, that jumps to humans, please do yourself a favor, go home and read. Unfortunately, Trump dismantled all the websites about it, so you can't easily get information anymore. But scientists are living in fear of the day it jumps, because the day it jumps, they've said, one scientist, a very prominent one, said he was going to, he's a food scientist, lock himself in his lab and not leave. Like, this is one of the most huge looming health crises there is for humanity. We've got to wake up. Traditions, and also this last thing, sorry, is that 75% of their surface is given over to some form of animal farming or growing food for those animals. So these situations are untenable for us. And if we really wanted to feed the world's people and be sensitive to world hunger and keeping traditions alive, we better think about keeping ourselves and our children and their children alive, and we better start changing some of those traditions. But we have to do it with sensitivity, and it has to be equality and equity. It can't just be, that the billionaires are still gonna have their million, dollar cows. It has to be equal, but nothing about our food system is equitable.
Any other responses to that question on stage?
Yeah, I think just to kind of echo that, I think that it's really important for people in the animal rights movement to talk about that there are these traditions of not eating animals in so many cultures. And yeah, that was an aspect of the movie that I was like, whoa, like the animal rights movement has moved way past. I mean, Peter Singer, I did read his book in high school, and it's Why I Was Vegan, but that was like 30 years ago, but yeah, I mean, Buddhist traditions and, Vietnam and China and India, and there's, so many traditions of not eating meat around the world. But I also think that it goes to the argument of not being a crazy vegan zealot, that in terms of people's traditions, like if it's hugely part of your family's tradition that you eat a lamb on Easter and you're vegan every other day of the year, but you want to participate in this tradition with your family, people should not judge you for that. That's idiotic, it's, I saw a really good TikTok or something that was like, people are always saying, I would go vegan, but it's so hard to give up cheese. And the person was like, okay, so do that. So be vegan, except don't eat cheese, don't call yourself vegan because that's not vegan. But harm reduction is very important. And I think that not having judgment around that is what's going to actually create a long-term movement, not yelling at people because they had honey in a tea that they didn't realize 4 years ago or something, which, I've seen it happen.
Any other questions? Anything you're wondering about?
Same. Yeah, I've seen activists that you were talking about purity or however you want to term it, who are very active and have done incredible amount of good, and they're not necessarily 100% vegan. And it's totally important to respect that kind of work and the effort that they make, and not be judgmental. That kind of judgment maybe was in first wave veganism years ago, when it was really single issue advocacy, like a lot of liberation movements start off the way, very internally focused, single issue and so forth. But one hopes we're evolving in a a better direction, but definitely. So you were asking Lucy also, like, what can you do for hope and so forth? It's there's so many things that we can do to help both human and animal injustice. And it doesn't have to be across the board, and it doesn't have to correspond to someone's definition of a term like veganism either.
Thank you. Is there anything else you would like to ask out there?
Hi, thank you, all of you, for your panel discussion. It's been very interesting. I'm curious about how you see animal welfare versus animal rights. And in terms of hope, there was a lot of hope in that film. Amongst the sort of horribleness that was highlighted, a lot of the activists and the academics were actually quite hopeful about the rapid change that's happened in terms of legislation. So I'm curious, because none of you have mentioned, what's been happening in California, Massachusetts, just over the last few years. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, and I think that the film did highlight that. And I'm curious, do you see, you've talked about purity within the vegan movement, and like, is there room for coalition building to actually affect change between, let's say, you all seem to be identified with an animal rights movement rather than an animal welfare movement. So I'm curious to hear, what you think about that, and is there room for coalition building, or are they just completely different movements?
I just want to point out that this came out in 2013, in case anybody's like, oh, this is exactly where the movement is right now.
Thank you. Agafin, you were making noises. Do you want to respond?
Okay. I do not think that the welfarism movement is even necessarily helpful to animal liberation, because yes, harm reduction is very important, but a 7 by 2 foot cage and a 12 by 10 foot cage is still a cage. And the welfarism is such baby steps that those are not my goal for where I want animal and human rights to be. Because you really can't half-ass liberation. And also that. Yeah, exactly. We don't have time for the baby steps of, well, we can pass this law and then there's, a little more room in their cage, or like, oh, we passed this law and they can keep their beaks. It's like that is nowhere near what the animals deserve and what the humans who are also suffering under the same umbrella of capitalism and the oppressions that it comes with. Like increasing minimum wage. Yeah, that should happen, but also a universal basic income is kind of where we should just start. So I don't think welfarism is very helpful to the grand finale of what we actually want, which is every being given the autonomy and the opportunity to thrive.
Can I say a little historical context? The year this film was made was probably the height of all that welfare stuff, when there was a lot of hope around it. And over the decade that has passed, they now have statistics, and unfortunately, so all the top animal rights groups, you may have remembered about 15, 20 years ago, you could go into Whole Foods, and there was a humane rating system poster in the meat counter, and it was signed by Farm Sanctuary, Mercy for Animals, Humane Society. They'd all been part of this massive push to get the egg industry to add enriched cages and things like that. And the statistics ended up so the industry did spend, X million of dollars, which they complained about, to put in little dividers so a hen could go into a little area and feel like she had some privacy and lay an egg, different bedding. It all backfired. I can't, it's too much to go into the specifics right now, but first of all, more animals are actually being killed now than ever, because it seems these humane welfare measures made doing a bad thing seem nicer again. So I'm all for everyone finding their way, and I totally can support what Augusta said, but I do personally have to say that you just have to be you. Find who you are and your compass in this, because I personally am tired of looking for a better way to do something bad. I don't think we have that time. And think of this for another movement, stopping child abuse. Are we gonna have, you have Meatless Monday, are you gonna have, I have a friend who used to joke, touch a kid Tuesday. It's okay to touch kids, but just on Tuesday, or touch kids every other day, but don't touch a kid on Tuesday, or something like that. He used to make this crass joke. It was very jarring, but there was truth to it. It's why? We need to understand what is our mental issue. Why are we always looking for a nicer way to do something cruel, terrible, polluting, greedy, harmful, hurtful, abusive? I'm just tired of it. Sorry.
I think you were saying before, and you mentioned Jerry too, there's not much time probably, the destruction of the planet.
Pandemics are really coming.
That's
Pandemics
definitely
are gonna get us before climate.
I mean, that's definitely one aspect of it too, and the clock is ticking on destruction of the planet. So I think if speciesism or animal liberation comes to fruition the way we want to, it's more likely, maybe I'm wrong, that it's going to be thrust on us rather than coming to the decision that we can, or coming to the decision slowly in the painful way that we've been talking about, because we're running out of time.
Thank you. Anybody from this side of the stage?
I think I'm going to go off subject just a second, but not 100%. I was not an activist in a way that most of the people here are, but I learned something very significant when we had a rescue of sheep that were local in our area. We couldn't even speak about it. We couldn't let people know. Sheep escaped from a local space, and we had to literally fight to get them. So because they're considered property, they were returned to the person that had them and could do whatever they wanted with them. So we're fighting to get them, and thankfully we did. There were 75, and when we got them, there was about 50, and he doesn't know what happened to them, but it's so much bigger than we know, and it's so much more than you can kind of fathom in your day to day. But I'm so grateful that there's people and champions. Beautiful woman in the front row helped us rescue some goats that were in horrible situations. And so it's goodness in people. So let's just keep doing the good, because they desperately need us.
Thank you, everyone. I think we're going to call it tonight. It's almost 10 o'clock, and we could go on, and maybe we'll do this again. Thank you for coming out, and we'll see you again. Thank you so much to the panelists tonight. Thank you for all the work that you do and for being here and sharing with us.